for a full 14 years. He could have honestly been a brother in a past life. Roger that, I called, clutching my camera tightly, while quickening my pace. If only he knew, I recalled, shaking my head, gathering my thoughts. A year ago, my dad lost it. He started yelling at my mother with words I didn't even know existed at 13 years of age. One night he came back home all clumsy and reeking of alcohol as my mother washed the dishes. He was beyond furious and got into an argument with her about me not passing my scout training since he was a vet. Things got messy as he started hitting her repeatedly until she fell unconscious. I just stood there watching, thinking I was in some dark, twisted dream. It was real. Hey, you good? He asked, looking over with a worried glance as I finally caught up beside him, nodding in agreement. Someday I will, I promised, slinging my arm over his shoulder. I took in the warm, hazy sunset of orange and crimson. Admiring the gorgeous view, the cold banks of the Canadian River never ceased to amaze me. Hey Val, let's set up camp for the night. I'm shot and we still have some snacks if you're starving, I insisted, while my grumbling stomach was no match for my wobbly legs. Sounds good, I'll get kindling for the fire while you make the tent, he suggested, with a lopsided grin, trudging off into the woods with his flashlight he got as a souvenir in Cali. That same year ago, his sister was kicked out because she was caught with a girl in her room who she claimed was her best friend. They said she was living a life full of sin, and so they sent her away to a conversion camp in order to reap what she sowed. I spotted a big enough open area with rocks and a few boulders surrounding the bushes, a good distance away from the railroad tracks. I sighed as I knelt down, pulling out our sleeping bags and the equipment for our temporary shelter. After that night, Val never left his room, not even to eat or go to school, as he was slowly dying of grief. It was his own decision to run away with me into the silent forest without uttering a word. An hour later, I could hear the soft snores of my stubborn friend as the tent slightly shook from his squirming. I sat on night watch, laying against the cold, smooth boulder as I stared at the dancing flames, my reflection waving in the mini inferno. My eyelids became heavy as I was ready for the night to come take me away, far from everything and everyone. I opened my eyes, rubbing the sleep out of them, as I looked around, noticing Val was out of sight. The sleeping bags were packed up neatly as if nothing changed. What a neat son of a bitch, I joked as I stood up to stretch, the daylight seeping in through the cracks in the trees. Val, get back here, I yelled, waking the startled birds as they cried and flew away. The echo returned through the valley as a deep whisper, the hairs on my arms standing straight up, not once leaving. I remember the sirens shrieking in agony as my mother was lying on a stretcher with the mask over her wounded face. My father was forced to the ground while a man restrained him with cuffs. I knew right then and there nothing would ever be the same. The day after, right in front of my empty house, I was forced into the town's orphanage, as I was under the legal age of an adult. The crunching of leaves and the mumbled curses came closer, as Val wore a grim expression. His tousled chocolate curls hugged his nape as his dark summer gaze took me in. I was proud to call him a brother I never had. Jenna was this fierce yet endearing girl that always saw the good in me. She was saying how I always knew I was a poet at heart and that someday I would do great things. She was simply one of a kind. I'm the master of my own fear, I initiated, as I saluted him while he returned it with a small grin spreading across his fallen face. His twin sister was only ever one of two people he cared about at all, to say the least. In one of my home languages, the word for love also meant expensive because of how it could cost you everything, in return for something beyond giving. Let's head east to follow the tracks, unless you want to stay here eating wild berries for the rest of your life, I let out, as I picked up my canvas and tightened the leather straps for the long route. Val huffed out a few incoherent words as we wheeled our way into broad daylight. The rustling trees were being caressed by the strong breeze. A few hours in, we entered an eerie tunnel as I fished out a flashlight. The ground was damp and coated with moss and vines surrounding the cylinder walls with poison ivy. A bullfrog croaked as it hopped across the rusty tracks in front of us, breaking the peaceful silence. Jenna really loved you, you know that? I told him as he looked at me with crestfallen eyes, filled with the smallest glint of hope about to be smothered. His chest heaved involuntarily with each breath, as his slender hands unlatched the flap of his leather satchel, grasping a worn-out picture. A subtle, nagging sense of melancholy overtook me as he slowed down his pace, momentarily coming to a halt. The picture showed Val laughing at his sister, who was probably telling him some silly joke. As his charming smile reached those kind eyes that were full of joy, it was only a small moment in time. Jenna had a playful smirk as the daylight emitted a glow, accenting her blazing honey curls. She was wearing slim jeans and a Yankees cap, as her arms adorningly wrapped around her twin brother. The background was their old house up in the Catskills, surrounded by an open grassy field. The front porch empty, the door slightly ajar. I know you miss her, but we'll find her someday. I promise you this, I sympathized, pulling him into a bear hug, not wanting to ever let go. I could feel his light sobs as he shook. His tight grip dug into my back as I felt the tears threatening to escape my eyes. The after sting blurred my vision. I miss her too, I repeated over in my head, an afterthought suddenly escaping me. Remember what you always said to me when I was lost? I'm the master of my own fear. I told him as he gave me a sad smile, holding out his hand in a brotherly pledge as I settled it with a pat on the back. I led the way as I urged him to keep going, seeing a faint light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you fall before you learn to rise above it, like a phoenix soaring higher each time. Run on, Water Dove. We've got a chopper to catch in the Badlands, I ordered, as I gave one final salute, sprinting off to reach the early morning view. Yes, sir, he yelled back as the deep, husky echo followed me. His footsteps came up from behind as I heard him laugh uncontrollably, knowing we would somehow make it in the long run. This was only the beginning of an endless journey, I heard in the back of my mind. A flowing sense of faith coursing through me as I gathered what strength I had left to make every moment count. I finally broke out into the heavenly rays of light as I quickly got out my camera, capturing the flowing autumn valley and the Golden Gate River from below in one shot, forever stuck.